no intrusion detection systems, no log aggregation. We had thousands of issues with patch management, software licensing issues, real concerns with the network management vendor. External vulnerability assessment. Right? The external view of the LAN was really good. We couldn't get through their firewall. Right? We couldn't get into the bank. But we took over the website. Right? This wasn't really a feat of hacking. They had a management console on the website that had a username that was admin, and the password was, somebody wants to guess, it was admin. So it wasn't really that hard for us to get over. But there were no controls in place to alert the bank that the account was, that the site was hijacked. We could have harvested customer data. So that link that goes to the core processor, they could have pointed that to my server. We did a social engineering test at this bank. This was interesting. We mailed CD-ROMs to the bank purporting to be from the ABA, new compliance rules. We sent 28 to the bank. 11 of them were inserted into bank's machines. Right, what happened when they inserted this CD was it opened up a tunnel out of the firewall. We were able to connect to the bank's network from our offices. At the same time, we sent a spoofed email appearing to come from the IT officer. It said, hey, everybody, we updated our email server. Come log in. 9 users gave up their domain usernames and passwords, including the compliance officer. So we were able to remotely connect and browse the LAN as if we were the compliance officer. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that I'm not going to talk about specifics here, but social engineering is a big threat to your bank. It's really something you should consider. It completely bypasses all of your perimeter controls. Once the fox is in the henhouse, so to speak. Even with all those issues identified, this bank received a 1 from the regulators. Satisfactory rating on their prior audit. Takeaway point number 11. A satisfactory audit does not equate to a secure environment. There's two sides of the picture here. So not to be all doom and gloom, you know, when you're talking about IT security, you have the tendency to be the guy who's always crying wolf. Regulation's good, okay? It forces us to think. That fact alone makes us less attractive targets. Other industries are easier to hit right now, quite frankly. Right? Hospitality, retail. Right? Make sure you say thank you when you're swiping your credit card, when you check out today. They're not regulated to the same degree that we are. Right? Consequently, they're softer targets to hit. So just be cognizant of that fact. At least part of the reason why we don't get hacked more is because there are other targets out there that are easier to hack than us. It's not always an indication that our security controls are great. And so let's just, we have to be careful to keep our egos in check. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Listening to Pete, and one of the advantages working in a firm where we do a lot of internal audits for community banks is they get to see a holistic picture a little bit. One of the trends we see a lot is banks relying a lot on outsourcing. And there's a false sense of comfort that I see, and quite often I hear is, well, you know, we've got a vendor, he does about 50 banks, he does about 70 banks. And the reality is, when we're doing these vulnerability reviews, what we're finding is, even with those vendors, their marketing department is moving way ahead of their security department. We won't be able to hijack a lot of these websites as we are if there were not fundamental weaknesses in those websites. That's the reality of it. And why are those vulnerabilities there? I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that we can't place too much reliance just on we can't place reliance on just on the fact that the vendor does 50 banks or 70 banks or 80 banks. We have to work together. It's your responsibility. That's a takeaway point from this thing. You have to manage it. If something goes wrong, it's not the vendor's fault. If we don't manage our risks, we know what will happen. The regulators will manage it for you. And then we become reactionary. Then we have to deal with a 300-page or 3,000-page regulation and a time frame in which we have to react, in which we have to conform. And liquidity, and I know we heard a little bit this morning about asset liability management and liquidity. Liquidity is a significant concern. So one of the other audit emphasis in today's environment, where the audit emphasis is changing, but this change is driven by regulators and the new guidances that are coming out. So we thought we'd share now a different perspective of a regulatory push emphasis and liquidity. And I asked Jim Cole, who's our audit manager in the financial audit group, to come and talk to us about the new changes. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Is this the clicker, or do I use the? I'll just use it down there. The one thing I don't want is to see the gecko drop with the disco ball, that kind of thing. Don't have enough time for it. Anyway, what I'd like to do this morning is talk a little bit about the impact of some of the recent regulatory changes on your internal audit process. And there are basically three things that I'm going to look at, have looked at, worked with a lot. And these deal with your balance sheet risk, in particular your interest rate risk and your liquidity. The three statements are the interest rate risk statement, liquidity statement, and I've added an additional one because it interrelates to them. It is the concentration risk statement that the regulators put out again early this spring. And that deals with such things as diversification, both asset and liability side, and all of these things will impact what your policies and procedures are to manage these risks, and the result of that will be an impact on your audit and review process internally. So let's take a look first at the interest rate impacts. Fundamentally, the new regulatory guidance on this hasn't changed very much. There are only about two new things in it, and those are the increase in the shock levels up to 400 basis points and the suggestion that an adequate job of testing net interest income impact from rate shocks should go up to 2 years in length. What's that going to mean for you in terms of your internal audit process? Well, the internal auditors are going to turn around and they're going to look for implementation of these regulatory changes in the form of new or improved policies. They're also going to look for additional documentation, board governance, ALCO review and intervention where you have such things as out-of-limit conditions. So the board, the governing structures of your organization need to be involved in setting targets, adjusting those targets. You're definitely going to, as pointed out earlier, you're definitely going to have new limits for the 400 basis points. You're also going to need to have new limits that take care of the 2-year period. Your old limits are probably not going to be appropriate for that. You'll either be bouncing against them and blowing through them, and the result having exception conditions or something else. Finally, the auditor is going to look for increased emphasis on your validation of your model, and that includes things like the model calculations, usually done by an external software testing entity. Your software vendor or your consultant should be able to provide you with copies of that validation. In addition, validation of your own assumptions, why you pick them, what support information you have to support them. Assumptions are critical in any modeling situation. And finally, the auditor is going to be looking for a good back test and a good analysis of why you have differences between what your model had projected and your actual results. Another interesting point is you think about using these models, involving them more in your just general planning cycle. Do your budget. You don't want to create a budget that says, gee, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to emphasize this product, we're going to emphasize these types of liability structures, and turn around and find out, guess what, at the end of the year, you have a big asset liability head. Start using these types of models and techniques to evaluate your business plans. Beyond that, you need to also consider things like dynamic modeling and the complexity of the balance sheet, perhaps using more complex modeling. I think that was covered earlier also. Shock tests and assumptions may be something you want to get into. How sensitive are you to some of your assumptions? Let's turn from here to the second and third of the regulatory statements. These are probably the ones that got the most attention. The new guidance is a supplement to the 2008 guidance. The 2008 guidance was about 5 pages. The new guidance runs over 50. I don't know how much of a supplement that is, but it's pretty much, you can figure, a new set of policy pronouncements, and it's fairly comprehensive. More than likely, your institution is going to look at a variety of things. I've listed some of them in this chart in terms of metrics and limits and things like that you're going to put into your policy. Your auditor auditor is going to be reviewing them again versus the requirements that the regulators have set out.